I'm going to do, I'd like to introduce to y'all Caroline Runke, who is the general manager of the Menard Underground Water Conservation District. Caroline is also from Valentine, so she's a local, right? That's local. It's like next door. Next door. I'd also like to introduce Summer Webb, who is the general manager of both the Culberson County and the Brewster County Groundwater Conservation District. Bless her heart. I don't know, are you from here? From Valentine as well, so there seems to be a trend. And then finally, we've got Slate Williams, who is the general manager of the Crockett County Groundwater Conservation District, who have all been kind enough to come on their Saturday to come and share with y'all a little bit about what they do. So the first thing I'd like to do is give each of them a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about their district. Are their board members appointed, elected, tax base, all of that sort of thing. Just add a little bit of a profile of the flavor kind of within the larger West Texas area. Is that fair? We go into it? So go ahead, Caroline. I'm going to let you go first.
Well, our district is confirmed in 1999, and we have so little water and so little money that somebody said that we didn't really need a district at all. But our confirmation election and our tax election passed by 94% because every single drop of water is really important in our county. We have 5 elected directors in the county, and our most important water issue, ironically, is protecting our surface water flows. In our county, has jurisdiction over 3 aquifers. The combined available groundwater from all 3 is 3,000 acre feet or 585,000 acres. So 90% of all of our water use in the county is from the San Saba River and its tributaries, and most of our efforts are concentrated on trying to keep those flows going. And as a consequence, I think we probably have a total of less than 60 permitted wells for irrigation. Our county depends 100% on agriculture, but most of it's livestock, and so most of our wells are domestic and livestock. And the problem that we have faced in recent years is what you see in a lot of West Texas counties is fragmentation, breaking up of ranches into smaller tracts, and that's particularly true along the river. So we're getting a lot more wells along the river, and even if they're just domestic and livestock, under 36-117, a domestic well, an exempt domestic and livestock well is allowed to pump 28 acre feet. To put that in perspective, that will water 1,100 cows all year long. So, you know, if you've got a 20 acre tract or a 50 acre tract or a 100 acre tract along the river, you don't need that much. Our district is unique in having legislation that allows us to cut down that exemption on tracts of less than 100 acres. And as I say, we have a lot of other issues, but that's the most important one, is to keep the water flowing, and we've set up DFCs.
Thank you, Caroline. Summer, tell us a little bit about your 2 districts, or 1. You get to choose.
I guess I'll just touch on both just because they are drastically different in the way that we work. Culberson County is predominantly irrigation, and all of our, right now, all of our permits are almost all irrigation based off of the historical use production. So Brewster County is very different in that most of Brewster County is domestic and livestock. We are rewriting our rules currently for Brewster County, so we are trying desperately to get that done. But of course, as Sarah has said, everything that we put in right now could change with the legislature. So Brewster and Culberson are in GMA 4, as well as Hudspeth County and Jeff Davis County and Presidio County. Culberson County is elected in a tax-basing district, where Brewster County is appointed, and we are given money by the county to work on. So we work differently, very differently in both districts. Brewster County, as you guys probably know, has a lot of wells. Here, you guys have several subdivisions that we don't have to deal with in Culberson County. So there's a lot of domestic wells going in all the time, and we are different than Caroline in that we don't have an exemption. So we have the 25 acre feet allotted to each exempt well, which makes it difficult in trying to understand how much water is actually being pumped out of the district. Right now, I would say our main goal in Brewster County is trying to get our rules set and then just trying to work on the science behind the decisions we make, which, as you all know, this is the biggest county in the state of Texas, so that isn't exactly easy, and that's where we're at right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Summer. Slade, tell us about you.
Again, Slade Williams with Crockett County Groundwater Conservation District.
You may need to speak a little closer.
Our
Rock
conservation
stars,
district
remember?
is that better? Our district is tax-based. We're very lucky in the fact that 99% of our taxes come from oil and gas. So we do deal with the fracking issue that I heard some of y'all talking about earlier, that it's kind of encroaching in this area. And we've dealt with oil and gas since probably the 20s and 30s. In Crockett County, maybe even a little earlier, but I think that's when most of it came in. We're very lucky with the amount of money we're able to pull in. But at the same time, my district is unique in the fact that we don't cover the township of Ozona, and I'm not sure, it's unincorporated, so is it called a township?
Sounds good to me. I'm not sure.
So we don't deal with the town, all we deal with is the Rancho community. So all of my constituents would be agricultural use is the main use that we've historically had, and with the fracking our biggest concern would be the amount of water we're pulling and the exemptions of limitations of exemptions, chapter 36.117, the water code, and worrying about the amount of water that's being pulled out there, because our MAG was 5,460 something acre feet for the entire county. But that was set before the oil and gas came in, and the oil and gas is using 3 or 4 times that, but they're exempt. And we're lucky again in another way, because we don't have a basin of water like, say, the Ogallala does. So we have water flowing through geologically very fast. And in some places it's a mile a day, and other places it's a lot faster than that. I have 5 elected board members on my board, and they're local ranching families that have been there since the beginning of the county. Actually, all of them that are there, and I guess that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to remember, and the hydrogeologists that are in the room can confirm this fact. Texas has an extraordinary diversity of groundwater resources. I mean, as a state, and so talking about county to county differences in terms of use, talk about county to county differences in terms of the type of hydrology and hydrogeology, and whether you have a karst system where things are kind of moving through with, high porosity, that it's very, very different. The oldest groundwater conservation districts, the first one, High Plains and Adeline, were track plains. So if you've got any hard questions, you ask her, because she was part of their education community outreach for a long time. But they've set the stage and the tone a lot in policy. But the Ogallala, both in terms of its hydrology and in terms of its use, is very different than, say, what y'all deal with, right? And so there's a conversation again about how that diversity is actually helpful in Texas to be able to adjust your management scheme. So I want to transfer the conversation over a little bit to groundwater management, or to GMAs and to DFC settings, and then finally into public input, right? So you've gone through twice now, both with Amy and with me, kind of an overview of that GMA process and how it is that a DFC is set and what a DFC really is. And remember, a DFC is a policy decision of what you want the aquifer to look like in a 50-year planning horizon. So either that's, and typically expressed in drawdown, but not always, right? And so it can also be expressed as, what did y'all just do? Oh, protecting spring flow, right? So having a certain amount of spring flow, but typically, yeah, I mean, exactly. So typically, a DFC is expressed as a certain amount of drawdown in feet, right? but sometimes it can also be based on spring flow. So what I'd like to ask each of the participants is how you would describe the DFC adoption process and what you think the purpose of the DFC is. Just kind of your thoughts on that. We'll start with that question, and we'll start with you, Carolyn, and then move down the line.
Well, the purpose of the DFC process, first it's set statute. You're supposed to come up with a balance between conservation and protection of the aquifer resources and the highest practicable production. Interestingly enough, the highest practicable production just came in 10 years ago as a requirement of groundwater district regulation. Before that, it was primarily concerned with the protection and conservation of the resource, and then that was added in 10 years ago. But in terms of say, my district participation in the DFC process, we look at our DFCs are set to describe the condition 50 years from now in our aquifer. In my district and in, say, Kimball County, right next door to us, we primarily depend on groundwater. And if we have a drawdown of as much as 2 feet, we're going to lose, did I say groundwater? Surface water. We've got to protect our surface water. And so over the 50-year period, we don't want to see a decline of more than 2 feet in our aquifers, because then the springs dry up and we don't have any water at all. So you saw in Shirley's map, saw all of those areas that were colored in blue. All of those are ones which are geared towards protecting the spring flows. We don't do it by spring flow in particular. We wanted to in our county, but when we went to the Water Development Board, they said that we didn't have spring cells in the model for calibration, and we were going to have to do it by setting a certain amount of drawdown. So in spite of the fact that it's not apparent that what we're doing is protecting spring flows, in those areas where we've set drawdown at less than 2 feet, that's what we're doing.
And if I can jump in, please note as well that when you submit your DFC to the Texas Water Development Board, they have the ability to say that's not feasible. And in fact, they just did this past planning cycle with a district out of GMA 9 that wanted to set it at, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2, and they said based on the population growth, based on the demand, based on those 9 factors that we outlined, that's not feasible, so you need to go back and choose another one. So you can't just choose, you know what I mean? You're also confined by what's actually practical as well. So anyway, Summer, what's your thought on the purpose of the DFC and that adoption process? What's been your experience of it?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been with the groundwater district nearly as long as probably either of these two up here, but so I've only gone through this one cycle. And unfortunately, in Alpine and Brewster County, we just don't have the data to really, with science, say we find this manageable and we find this practical. So we did adopt what was previously adopted before, with the understanding and the discussion over and over and over that we really need more science and we really need more data. It's not for lack of wanting it, it's not for lack of trying, it's just we don't have it and we're working towards getting it. So I would say, for me, the DFC process is frustrating because we know that it's probably not accurate at best. So that's unfortunately my take.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, and it's important as well to remember that models are still just models, and there's calibration errors. And in fact, there's even an example recently. I think it was in GMA 13. Anyway, up over east, kind of northeast Texas area, where they found that the model that Texas Water Development Board had created was wrong. And so the districts they came together and paid to recalibrate that model so that they found that it was a confined aquifer versus an unconfined aquifer, which drastically changed their outputs, right? And so, even if you have the science for a model, they need updating, and there can be errors and there can be differences, right? So that's also not a silver bullet kind of panacea that you should rely on. Well, if you just get a model, and there's also differences in opinion in good science and bad science. I'll put that out there too. Slate, what's your experience with the DFC process?
With my board, the DFC process, we didn't see any major growth by 2060. And the idea that we had was, how can you really tell what's going to happen by 2060 anyway? I mean, to make a plan out to that far was almost a little bit ridiculous. But it was good in the aspect of get us to think about that, because my board was a little complacent on the research to figure out what the groundwater looked like at that time, and we were able through that to be forced a little bit, I guess, to do more projects and see what's going on in the groundwater there. And it's good that we did, because we actually have a stake in what's going on in Pecos County with the Clayton Williams and all that. And I'm not related to them, by the way. But we found out that the water that comes through Crockett County, a lot of that, we used to think that there was a fault along the Pecos River, but a lot of that comes from that area. Some of the overflow that basin may fill up and may keep on flowing. It comes through and through Crockett County, goes down into Valverde, and comes out in those big springs down there. So it did help us to look and see the interconnectivity of all these different aquifers, and that's something that we're going to have to look at in the future too. Other than that,
thank you. So my next question for you is, now that you've described what your view on the DFC setting process is, and you've described some of your concerns and some of the challenges of that, public input. What has your experience been of public input in setting the DFC, right? Regardless of who it is, if it's people that are advocating for spring flow, or if it's people who are advocating for increased groundwater markets and export. What has been your experience of the public input process? What are your thoughts on how to, at which point in the timeline is it most effective? And Carolyn, we'll start with you again.
And you're talking about the DFC process now?
Right.
Yeah.
Did I say GMA?
Well, yeah, you said GMA and DFC.
And DFC.
But, you know, of course, we are very anxious for public input. We've learned a lot from public input, and all of our meetings are not only posted in every county in the GMA, whether it's a district, there's a district in the county or not, but it's also posted on the Texas Water Development Board website, so anybody can easily find out when we're having meetings. And one thing that we found is that, you know, it's very important that if somebody has a specific issue or they want a DFC set a specific way, they've got to show up early in the process. During the first cycle that we went through from 2005 to 2010, well, it was in Pecos County, but they wanted to have the DFC set at a certain level. And they came in early in the process with hydrology. We worked with them. There was a lot of data exchange, and that was very useful. And we were able to come up with a DFC that balanced the issues and was very satisfying to everybody as far as we knew. Now, in this second cycle, in another county, we went through the whole process. We had a lot of people attending all of the meetings. And then at the next to the last meeting, when we really basically had all of the data saucer blown and knew what we were going to do, they came in and said, we want it differently and we want to see a whole different process. Well, that was the next to the last meeting, and really we put off the final decision for one more round, but we really need that public input early on, and we reach out to people to try and get it.
Thank you. Sam?
Okay, so as I said, I'm in GMA4, and with the 5 districts that are in GMA4, there were only two districts that had public comment from their individual meetings, and it happened to be Brewster County and Culberson County, which was a little ironic. And one county wanted a much higher DFC, and the other county wanted a much lower DFC. So it was kind of funny. Anyways, I totally agree. The earlier the better, and if possible, it sounds silly, but in writing, like if you could really articulate in writing and in a short, this section and why and what you feel, I think it goes a lot further with board members, not only in the DFC process, but on hearings, just in your individual districts. If you can submit something in writing and be clear and concise about why you feel it should be this way, and not, it's just wrong, like, what do you see as the way to fix it? So I would say that. We are still in our explanatory report process for GMA4, so we're working towards that. But other than that, would be my answer.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump in and just make sure that y'all, because she just threw out a new terminology for you, which is explanatory report. So as a matter of context, this is only the second time that as a state we're going through the DFC setting process. It was, the first one was in 2008, is that correct? 2010 was the first DFC, so this is only the second time. As of last session, no, not last session, but as of this past DFC setting process, we've also had to do an additional thing called an explanatory report. An explanatory report is a document that describes and justifies how it is that you consider those 9 factors outlined by 36.108 of the Water Code, right? And so groundwater districts have had to get together, figure out how to co-finance amongst their GMA, and ask Carolyn and Slate how many GMAs are in their, or how many districts are in their GMA, co-finance this explanatory report, which you then submit to the Texas Water Development Board, and they approve as administratively complete. Many of our GMAs are still in this process. Now, once that's done, there's an additional side process that can happen. If you're unhappy with the resultant DFC that's been adopted by the boards of the GCDs, you can appeal it. And there's an entirely complicated, convoluted SOA process that was created by House Bill 200 from last session to appeal a DFC. And if you're familiar with Montgomery County, the Lone Star District, they've just had, bless their heart, horrible time with that process. So I just want to put that out there. So let's go back. Slate, public comment. When do you think you can most positively affect the process?
As it's hard to be here on the end because everything's already been said. But I don't think you can say it any better than as early as possible. And we sometimes we put out our notices in the paper 2 or 3 times, even though we're supposed to only do it once. We call people, try to get people in. And in my district, it's even for rule changes, things like that, it's hard to get people in. You want to come in and sit with us and talk with us, call us on the phone, write letters. I guess since nobody shows up to our meetings most of the time, I guess we're doing a really good job, maybe. That's all.
I don't know a single general manager that doesn't have an open door policy whose cell phone isn't known by every member of their county when they're answering phone calls day and night. That chart that I put up that showed the accountability metrics of the GCD, that first layer was the local accountability. Part of that is the fact that they have Open Meetings Act, right, which means that they are required to host their meetings. Every time that they get together, that's a public meeting. You should go. They're also subject to public information requests, and I know that y'all will not like me for bringing this up, right, but y'all are subject to public information requests, which means that the public can request information of the district. They are a political subdivision of the state, right? And so there are all these factors on a local level as well that gives you transparency and accessibility and ability for input as well. So we've got a couple more minutes before I want to open up to questions. And I think that this is a really interesting point, just tying in, let me backtrack and say quickly, to advocate for Charlene's desire to improve future conditions as well. I know that when especially the GMA 9 was going through their process, you provided an online form for the public to fill out that listed those 9 considerations outlined by 36.108 of the Water Code. You're really going to know that statute by the end of today. So that you're specifically providing comment, not just, I love springs, because frankly, that's not helpful to anybody. I mean, we love springs too, but unless you give them a real reason for why it is that something needs to be included in that explanatory report, and that's what happens. Your public comment gets put into the explanatory report, which in turn becomes a legal document that's used for the DFC as challenge. So see, again, how there's the trickle up or trickle down effect of public comment and how that affects the entire process. So I just wanted to kind of put a plug out there that you can do that locally as well, is really look at the statute, come up with a form, come up with, okay, what is it from socioeconomic perspective that you're really affecting here? There's ways to target your public comment. So what I wanted to go back to is in terms of talking about the GMA process as well. GMA 7 did something really, really interesting this go around, which is that they adopted a DFC for a county with no GCD. And I'm going to let Carolyn talk a little bit about why that's so unique. Because what they did is they basically put themselves to where they have legal liability to defend this DFC. All of these GCDs, there's 20 of them? 21 GCDs in GMA 7 chose to adopt a DFC for Val Verde County where they have no GCD because they decided that it was important that their spring flow be protected. Now that is very much outside of the statutory requirement of a GCD, but that is pretty significant. So Carolyn, can I let you talk about a little bit about that? I think it was an interesting scenario.
Well, in the first place, GMA 7 is the largest one in area in the state. It was 43,000 miles going from outside the door here to San Saba County, from Sweetwater to Rabbittville. And we have the area of the GMA is defined by the boundaries of the Edwards Trinity Aquifer. But we also have parts of 4 other major aquifers within our GMA area, and we have to adopt DFCs for that. And of the 21 designated minor aquifers in the state, we have 9 of them in GMA 7. So it's a pretty formidable task. But one of the things that we had some input on early on, and we needed to pay attention to, is that enormous amounts of water are put into the Rio Grande from Pecos, Val Verde, and Kinney counties. Pecos and Kinney counties have groundwater districts. Val Verde doesn't. But we are ever in hope that they will put in the GCD. Yeah, we hope that they will put in the GCD because they are enormously important in the flows in the Rio Grande. And so actually they developed a separate model which protects the spring flows at San Felipe Springs